You person, how do Hey everybody, welcome to Kent with Bent number 146, Kent's Arena. I am here, of course, with Bent Hovind, and we are back on the spooky version of our set, which has pumpkins and spiderwebs. Because nothing says October like pumpkins and spiderwebs. Which also means, that I had virtually no place to put the donations counter. So now it's just mostly over the black bar around Kent on the main video area. So that's just where it is now, for October maybe. So I hope everyone is doing well. Bent, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm excited for this. It's been a weird day. I woke up at like 3 a.m., did audio stuff for like 6 or 7 hours, and went and had like a 4-hour nap, and then woke up feeling like it was the morning. So I had some coffee. Yeah, it's been a whole crazy thing. Kushina Bahaku God's minion Keller says for $1.99. Can either of you make it colder here? Are you kidding me? If I had weather control, I would make it colder here. We have been in the 100s, not Celsius, Fahrenheit for 2-3 months.
Yeah, we're breaking records every day.
Yeah, like
we broke our record the other day by 5 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah,
which is
if I could make it colder anywhere, it would be here. I'm like, this is October. If I could get the temperature to go into like just the 90s would be fine. Just the 90s. I mean, give me 90-degree weather. So yeah, no. Unfortunately, all the things that could actually make the planet colder and anything approaching a reasonable time frame are all things that are deeply unpopular, like cloud seeding and other kinds of geoengineering projects. So yeah, if you hear an echo, I don't know why. I am looking at all of my audio settings and nothing is coming through that should be an echo. So
I'm on push to talk, so I'm usually not pushed.
Yeah, I don't know. If you're hearing an echo, if anyone else is hearing an echo, let me know. All right, so what are we here for? Because we're not here to talk about the weather. We're not here to talk about, I don't know, my troubles with figuring out where to put the donation thingy. I'm the one who left the Pacific Northwest. It's true, I did leave the Pacific Northwest. And then I moved to the Northeast, and then I moved to the Southwest. I'm staying out of the middle of the country, though. No, none of that. No, like Utah or Montana or Colorado. But I do kind of like Colorado. Doesn't matter. We are here to take a look at the nonsense that Kent Hovind spews, laugh about it, debunk it, and have some drinks. And so this is, in fact, a drinking game stream. Now, here's a few things about that. One is, if you decide to participate with anything intoxicating, please be aware of your limits. Pace yourself. Don't go overboard. If you do decide to play along with anything intoxicating, do not go and drive a car. Do not operate heavy machinery. Do not fly an airplane. Do not text your ex. All of these are really bad ideas. You should not do any of them while under the influence. Now, if you don't want to play along with alcohol, that is absolutely fine. This is a stream where I'm going to drink. Ben's going to drink something that doesn't have alcohol. I believe it's Baja Blast. Yep, I have hard Baja Blast. I have hard Baja Blast, so we're both drinking Baja Blasts. But yeah, you can play along with soda, tea, coffee, juice, water, whatever you want, right? It's fine. Vape, pen, or you can just not consume anything, right? You can clap, just pump the air, whatever, right? Just whatever works for you is fine. This is not something where we're going to shame you if you're not participating in the drink part. It is just for fun. It is not a serious thing. The whole show is mostly just for fun. It is not a serious thing. So I want to get that caveat out there. And there's one thing that I do want to talk about before we get into the drink rules, which is a thing to do with Matt Powell. Now I'm going to cover this more extensively on Matt with Maddie this month, presuming that Maddie is around and we have one, which I'm expecting. It's just that I haven't asked her yet. So that is that there has been a lot of stuff breaking about Pastor Stephen Anderson of Faithful Word Baptist Church in Tempe, Arizona. About him basically being the worst possible human being you could reasonably understand as a possibility to his family, to his kids and wife, and also his wife being a horrible person to their kids. So Matt is on the right side of this. Matt is calling for Steve Anderson to step down, and I want to acknowledge now that he is on the right side of this one, and that is not something I was expecting. So I want to say thank you, Matt, for calling for Pastor Stephen Anderson to step down as all of this has come to light, and also for not dismissing the allegations on the grounds that the person who broke them was a trans woman, which I expected him to do. Expected him to say, well, that was just, and then use some horrible slur who reported on this, so we can't trust that. He didn't do that. He, in fact, accepted that that was probably true because of the story lining up. And so, good job, Matt. We'll cover that, like I said, more on Matt with Matty, because it'll be about Matt Powell. We'll go over a little bit of that. So, look, I want to give credit where it's due, and what he did was not easy. So, thank you very much, Matt Powell. I really do appreciate you being on the side of the safety for the children involved in this situation, especially. So, yeah. Anyway, so what are the drinking rules? So, we will take a drink anytime Kent Hovind says something that's just so stupid we have to cool our brains down. Got this brain coolant. That's what this drink is here. We will also take a drink anytime Kent Hovind actually gets something factually correct, that he's not just citing something, but actually has to be in his brain, and then he says it. Then we take a drink for that being correct. We will also take a drink for any jokes that he tells that don't land, or any stories that he tells that never happen, right? So if he's telling a story about like a professor of apparently fish feeding from Berkeley, California, who he had a debate with on an airplane, and then everyone got up and clapped, yeah, we're going to take a drink for that. Basically, if it seems like it should be posted on r/that happened, we're taking a drink for it. It's a judgment call, but here's the other secret. The drink counter, the drinking, it doesn't actually ultimately mean anything. It's just a fun thing. So who cares? We'll also take a drink anytime Kent Hovind mentions that political party that was really popular in Germany in like the 30s and 40s. Take a drink for that. You know which ones I mean. We will also be taking a drink anytime Kent Hovind, this is once per strain. If Kent Hovind mixes up anything we can know just from the skeleton of Lucy, the Australopithecus afarensis, with anything we can know about any wider taxon to which she belongs, whether it be her species, genus, subfamily, family, tribe, any of that stuff, we'll take a drink, and that's called the ad hominid drink trigger. We will also take a drink if Kent Hovind cites a source, we check the source, and rather than supporting him, it directly contradicts him. We call that the Trojan source. We will also be taking a drink if I screw up the production. Now, if the computer has some kind of program crash, or my connection to YouTube goes down, and some other technical difficulty, that's not a Dapper's a professional drink, because that's what this drink trigger is called. That's just, stuff happens. But if I actually screw it up, so for instance, if I fail to update the drink counter, or I had forgotten the donations counter, or something like that, or I switched the wrong scene or something, or I keep bent muted on accidentally or something, that's a Dapper's a professional drink. Yeah, it happens. We can also there are also a number of ways that you guys can trigger the drink counter. I can't. So one of the big ones is if you super chat or membership milestone chat anything, the effect that AIG, that's Answers in Genesis, are a bag of dicks, we will take a drink. That is because of their previous copyright trolliness antics. But also, I mean, they're a bunch of anti-vax scumbags who are actively harming the world by, like, actually making the world less healthy. Even if you ignore all their political advocacy, that is just atrocious. Just the health effects of their anti-vax stance is enough for them to be bags of dicks. Let's see. So you can also trigger a drink if you send a membership milestone chat or super chat that has any of the kaiju emojis. We have Godzilla, we have Mothra, we have King Ghidorah. So there's that. Also, sometimes my phone might make the sound of Godzilla or Mothra. We'll take a drink for that. And Bent, if there's a prediction, Bent or I can predict what Kent's going to say next. We'll take a drink for that. And what am I missing?
Mention gift memberships.
Yes, gift memberships. Anyone who gifts a membership, I will take a drink for each gift membership up to a certain point. Basically, once it gets to like the 30 or 40 region, I'm just going to finish this drink. Go ahead. But we got a couple more things to read. So, for $6.66, My Unfinished Journey says, Hail Nero, Hail Daps, and Hail Unwelcome Nuance. Yes. Roshna Fahakwa God's Minion Keller for $1.99 says, Drink if Kent says Chihuahua or outer space. No, I don't think I'm going to add those, at least not right now. And then Hank says, Hank _ for $6.66 redos, that's my secret, Dap. I'm always lying. From Kent Hovind. Yes, he is in fact almost always. Roshan Hakuga's minion Keller for $1.99 says AIG are a bag of Richard's carriers. I'll take a drink for that. And imagine being an unironic Richard Carrier fan. Okay. Bent, are you ready for this?
Yeah.
All right, so what Kent is...
Very ready.
Awesome. Oh, and the Bird Dog 33, who's been a member for 17 months and is at the Tetrapod level, just set a Mothra and Godzilla membership milestone chat, so here's a drink for that. So, just for context, what Kent Hovind is talking about, how dangerous democracy is, because sometimes people vote for things that you don't like. Now, I would point out that most democracies have some kind of constitutional system that guarantees certain things regardless of the vote of people, so that unpopular but ultimately reasonable to keep legal activities are legal. His big example was abortion. So apparently the big problem with democracy is sometimes people might vote for abortion to be we're just gonna hit play.
They never can last. They will always become a dictatorship. And I get real nervous when I hear leaders in our country saying, we're going to spread democracy around the world. Maybe the dumbest thing we could do.
Okay, so a couple things. Historically, democracies have tended to fall apart. But then again, nothing lasts forever. So I'm not sure that the fact that in the past democracies have ended as not democracies is an argument against democracy, because also dictatorships tend to end eventually. My Infinished Journey just gifted 1 Dapper Dinosaur membership, which went to Alex Markle. Thank you so much. Oh, by the way, Bent, how was that free pizza that you got from last time?
That was amazing, and I really needed a pizza at that moment, so thank you so much, chat.
There you go, chat. We could get Bent another free pizza. It's possible. We have to get a little bit past 100%. Possible. Actually, right now, the special avatar frames from that super chat are on Sheepit. They're rendering this second. So,
nice.
But yeah, also, I'm with Kent that I think America should stop "quote unquote" spreading democracy. Although I think it's for different reasons than Kent thinks. I think it because it never actually works ever. You can't spread democracy at the point of the barrel of a gun. Not how it works. So, I guess Kent and I are on the same page for the most part when it comes to all these stupid wars of pseudo-imperialism that the United States likes to go on. And yeah, it should definitely stop. But, okay. Savage Cobra, the Eddie Akaran vertebrate for $4.99 says, but the U.S. Constitution recognized women as citizens eventually. How dare we? I mean, yeah. Well, there is that. I mean, like, constitutions can be amended and can change. And also, not every country has a constitution that is a written document. Some just have a series of norms and the way things work. One famous example is the United Kingdom, which has no written democracy. And that does not mean that it doesn't have a constitution, though. It has an unwritten constitution that is a series of just how things work. And some of the thing, and also there's, not jurisprudence. There's like precedent from court cases and things like that. So, being constitutional does not always mean that you have a written constitution. Anyway, here we go.
We need to spread righteousness around the world, spread godliness, but democracy is a horrible form of government.
The thing is, you know that what he means by spreading righteousness around the world is just getting other people to convert to Christianity. Right? But here's the thing. Historically, Christianity and, high morals and, not being violent murderers, things like that, don't actually correspond very well, right? I'm not going to say that that means that, Christianity is a particularly violent thing. I don't think it is. But, equating people becoming Christian to people becoming righteous is a dangerous slope to go down. Because that's how you get things like the Southern Baptist Convention just kind of sweeping abuse scandals under the rug in the Catholic Church, too. Right? Because we can't let people know that these good Christian people are doing all these horrible things. How you get revisionism about things like the Crusades. It's just fine. You know what? They were defensive wars, and there was no excessive use of violence. No, they weren't defensive. There was definitely excessive use of violence, and the best I can say is that it's just how war was at the time. But that doesn't make it okay. So, yeah, spreading Christianity is not the same thing as spreading righteousness. Want to say it's the same thing as spreading godliness? I'm not going to argue with you because I don't know how to objectively define godliness in a way that anyone can look at it and agree that that's what's being spread. And I'm not here to tell you what religion to follow or not. So, Roshan of God's Minion Keller for $4.99 says, I think I learned a lot of things Christians chant in the Book of Common Prayer. Just sharing. Yeah, so the Book of Common Prayer is a liturgical handbook for the Anglican Communion. I have a copy somewhere. And it has a lot of various prayers and stuff like that. And so it is also, I believe there's a modified version that's used by so I don't remember the exact name, but there's an ordinariate in the Catholic Church that's specifically for Anglo-Catholics who are converted to Roman Catholicism. And the ordinary is a married Catholic priest who converted from Anglicanism. And so technically he dresses kind of like a bishop, but he's not actually technically a bishop. He's the ordinary of that ordinariate, and most of the priests in that ordinariate are in fact married and have converted from Anglicanism and have their own version of the Book of Common Prayer. So it does have a life outside of Anglicanism, and also there are various so-called continuing Anglican groups that have broken away from the worldwide Anglican communion, usually in order to be extra homophobic, which is nice, I guess. That was heavy sarcasm, by the way. They also sometimes have their own versions of Common Prayer. So there you go, some Book of Common Prayer lore. The one I have is one of the ones from like the main body of the Anglican.
Because the majority can simply vote to annihilate the minority. Now,
Yeah, that's again why we have constitutional protections. You can't do. You have to work a lot harder to do that than just having a vote.
our republic is very different. A constitutional republic is what our founding fathers.
Oh, it's Mothra. Take a drink from Mothra. All right. Also, so this is one of those weird talking points that I only see from I really only see from people on the right who don't really have anything to say, but they want to complain anyway. Which is to say that, this, the United States or whatever country isn't a democracy; it's a constitutional republic. Hey, that's a subset of democracy. It just is, right? If the people are voting on things like representatives, then it's a representative democracy. If those representatives are bound by a constitution, then it's a constitutional republic that uses a representative democracy to decide who is going to rule over the republic. Basically, if you're voting for major things that actually matter, it's a democracy. Constitutional republics are a kind of democracy. There are other kinds. There are direct democracies, where all the decisions are just taken as a poll of the electorate, right? So, hey, we want to, have this new law. So literally everyone who can vote has the opportunity to vote yes or no on this law. And then everyone who can vote could propose new laws. And Caden Slinker says, I'm sorry, I have no idea what for, though.
Gave us. We'll get into more of that later. So, scores of people have made attempts to conquer and rule the world.
Scores. There are dozens of us. Dozens.
Down through history. He wanted to use this idea that man can be God, and of course, whoever's
He is Satan.
in charge is God. They think they're God. Whoever has, the biggest gun or the biggest sword or the biggest club or the most people following him, he's God.
Do you think that Kent knows that most people don't conflate a hypothetical world dictator with a god, and that most people don't think that those are the same thing?
No, I don't think Kent understands that.
Okay. We'll take a poll. We'll see what my audience thinks. So let's start a poll. Let's see. Here we go. Are a world dictator and a god the same thing? So we'll see what my audience thinks. I feel like they're gonna not conflate those two things, but then again, I don't know. I'm just a stupid dinosaur. All right, here we go.
Satan caused so many to be wicked in the days of before the flood that God destroyed the world with a flood. God always has his faithful few, though, that disrupt Satan's plans. Here's what happened. God created the world. Satan became proud of his beauty, decided man should worship him. Satan rebelled against God, and he was cursed.
I do want to point out that this is stuff that's not actually in. Right? So, when Kent's like, doing his whole like, oh, I just believe what's in this book and holding up the Bible. Yeah, no, can't. You've had it a lot of nonsense. None of this is in the Bible. You can believe it. I don't really care, but like, not biblical.
And then God said, someday some seed of the woman is going to bruise your head. That's the first prophecy of the coming Messiah, Genesis 3:15.
Or it's an ideology about the enmity between snakes and humans. Because, there's also that, right? Now, look, here's the thing. I'm not going to sit here and be like, this is the correct way to interpret this saying, and it definitely is or isn't a prophecy. I don't care. I'm not here to interpret prophecy or tell you what is or isn't. But I am here to tell you that the author of Genesis 3 wrote this as an ideology for why humans and snakes don't like each other. As well as an ideology for a lot of other things, like why humans die, why humans have the moral capacity that's normally associated with the gods, why humans are limited compared to why humans have to toil, why childbirth sucks so much. Right? There's a lot of ideologies going on here. An ideology is a mythological story that explains how or why things are the way they are in cases where such an explanation is not just obvious. Savage Cobra, the Ediacaran invertebrate for $4.99 says, I don't think Kent Hovind understands is a complete sentence. I guess I can't really disagree with you. Yeah. Alright, so here we go.
And there's been a war going on ever since. Here's the prophecy right here. In verse 14, the Lord God said unto the serpent, Satan.
Again, nowhere in the Bible is the serpent in the Garden of Eden identified with Satan. Nowhere. It's not even identified with the same serpent in Revelation, where there's a seven-headed serpent that comes out of the sea. That ancient twisting serpent, or whatever the exact phrase is. That's a reference to Leviathan from both Job and the Book of Psalms. Not to the Satan from the Garden of Eden. So, yeah. In fact, you can compare the Greek in the New Testament in Revelation to the Septuagint in the Psalms and in Job, and there's similar language being used of them. And the underlying Hebrew in the Septuagint from the Psalms talking about Leviathan is almost a direct quote from earlier Ugaritic texts talking about Leviathan as a twisting sea monster that the gods slay in order to create the world, which is also what the God of the Bible is depicted doing in the Psalms, in the Psalm with Leviathan in it. There's a whole through line, goes all the way back to ancient Near East cosmology with chaos monsters. Goes through the Psalms into Revelation and bypasses the whole Adam and Eve story entirely. Let's see. Let's end that poll. I don't want to run the poll for silly little poll. Let's see how you guys voted. Let's see. Are a world dictator and a god the same thing? No, 56%. Turtle, 30%. And yes, 13%. So the no's have it. The turtle is coming in with a strong case. Maybe if there were a world dictator that was actually a turtle, that might actually be the turtle god. Bent, I might have to start a new religion and or political movement.
Good luck with that.
Thank you.
Because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle and above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life. And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel.
Okay, so Eve is depicted in Genesis 2 and 3 as the first woman ever live, and the mother of the rest of humanity forever, right? So who counts as the seed of Eve? Bent, what do you think?
I think Kent would think it's basically every human.
Right. That's how the story depicts it, right? Is every human, I guess, except Adam, right? Because, whatever, he was specially created by God, sure.
That seems fair.
Right. So, and the snake and the woman are being juxtaposed, and both are being talked about as their seed. So, the seed of Eve is all of humanity, save, I guess, Adam. And the seed of the snake is therefore, because this is a parallel structure, just the rest of snakes. So who's bruising the head of the snake? Humanity generally. Whose heel is the snake biting? Humanity generally. The primary reading of this text is that because of this event in the Garden of Eden, humans and snakes don't like each other much. which is broadly true throughout most of history. Humans and snakes don't always get along very well. Now, again, if you want to go into some kind of typological thing where, you're looking at sort of mystic connections between different parts of the Bible, okay, that's great. But if you want to know what the data says about what the original author of this text thought this meant and what the original audience of this text thought it meant, it's just an ideology for why humans and snakes don't get along. That's it.
Most Bible scholars interpret this bruising the heel as Christ dying on the cross.
Most is a pretty strong case, although that is a traditional Christian interpretation. So,
A bruise to the heel hurts, but it's seldom fatal. You ever get a stone bruised by stepping on a rock and you limp around for days afterward?
No, I've never had a stone bruised. However, I have had my heel bruised. So I'm sure that's just kind of misspeaking. I'm not going to go into it.
But it's not fatal.
Generally,
not many die from a bruise to the heel. Bruise to the head can be fatal. So most people, for all of history, have interpreted this passage as Satan's going to be able to bruise the Christ at the cross. He's going to hurt him, but he came back from the dead. And now that seed of the woman is going to bruise his head. Not over yet. And the idea of Satan knows, some seed of the woman is going to bruise my head, crush my head. Somebody's going to do me in. So he decided to kill every human being on the planet. He wants to utterly destroy humanity any way he can.
Okay, so for a while we've actually been wondering why Kent's version of Satan has, total destruction of humanity as one of his goals, and how does that benefit him? And I guess the answer is because if he kills all of humanity, then Jesus can't come save humanity. So humanity has to die because Jesus is going to destroy Satan in the process of saving humanity. But also, according to Kent, Jesus did save at least the Christians, but Satan hasn't been destroyed. And I don't see how destroying humanity now would fix the problem of Jesus already having come in the past. I'm still left with, I don't understand how Kent's version of Satan works.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I'm going to take a drink, because Kent's version of Satan, on its own terms, just doesn't make sense.
Just like when Herod wanted to kill baby Jesus in Bethlehem.
Right, but okay, first, the slaughter of the innocents is not a historical event. Second, in the narrative, the idea is supposed to be that Jesus is going to grow up to become the king of the Jews, a job Herod already had and didn't want to lose. So if he kills the Jesus child as a baby before he gets the chance to become the king, then he's already avoided that prophecy. Right, so in the narrative, the flow of time is a thing that exists and is paid attention to by the author in Luke. So, what's happening here? How does Satan killing all of humanity now prevent Jesus from having come 2,000 years ago? See what I mean? It just doesn't actually fit together. And even Kent's examples don't work because Kent's examples, the authors of the gospel, they knew what time was. They made their stories actually make sense in the context of time, which I know is apparently some kind of crazy foreign concept for Kent.
He's only after one kid, but he killed them all. Now, Jewish tradition tells us about 22 babies were killed.
Jewish tradition about the slaughter of the innocents? I don't know that there's any Jewish tradition about the slaughter of the innocents. I've never heard of one. Now, granted, I'm not exactly like a scholar of Judaism or anything, but the slaughter of the innocents, I keep saying incident, I don't know why. The slaughter of the innocents is a story from the Christian Gospels that is ahistorical. There never was a slaughter of the innocents, right? It's not a thing that happened in real life. And so it's a story, it's basically a legend from Christian texts, which there's no particular reason for Jewish people to be interested in. So the only way in which I can see there being a story about the slaughter of the innocents from Jewish texts is in response to later Christian writings. But also, I don't know why they would specify 22 as the number of innocents killed. Yeah, none of this makes much sense to me.
In Bethlehem's a small town. You know, there weren't a lot of kids under 2 years old. It wasn't like he killed thousands of people. And Herod later did get called in for that and got in trouble.
That's the thing, though. We don't have evidence of that, right? Chances are he would have, because even though Herod's reign was not exactly the most kind, and the Romans themselves weren't exactly humanitarians, they also weren't big on just random baby slaughtering. That wasn't really their thing. They were kind of against that kind of thing. So we would have, most likely, some evidence of Herod having been called to account for the fact that he just went out and slaughtered a bunch of babies for silly reasons in his client kingdom of Rome. Romans would not have been very happy with it, right? And yeah, as much as I'm not a big fan of many of the things that the Romans did in terms of conquest and colonialism and all that stuff, they weren't big on baby murder. We can give them at least that, right?
There's a great book called the Archko volume that deals with that.
I've heard of the Archko volume. I'm pretty sure that's a modern forgery. Archko volume? The Archko volume. Yeah. Archko volume or Archko library is a 19th century volume containing what purports to be a series of reports from Jewish and pagan sources contemporary with Jesus that relates to the biblical text describing his life. The work went through a number of versions and has remained in print. Originally published in 1884. Hey, you guys want to guess why it was published in 1884? Because it's basically when it was written. Right? There are no actual manuscripts of the original content in the Archko volume. So this is what Kent means when he says that there is a Jewish tradition. He doesn't actually mean that there are ancient Jewish writings with a manuscript tradition that actually goes back any distance into the past. He means that a 19th century forgery claiming to have Jewish sources on the events in the New Testament says this. Which is there any hoax that Kent won't fall for if it supports his bias? Does Kent have a single critical thinking bone in his entire body? And yeah, the reason I had heard of the Archko volumes was specifically because they're a hoax. Let's see. Roshan of Hakogod's minion Keller says 4,400 divided by 200 doesn't equal 22. I mean, it. Good math. I'm not going to math. I'm not math. You can't make me do math. I do math all the time for my job. I'm not going to do it right now. Well, this is my job. That's 44 divided by 2, which is yeah, it is 22.
Some of the archaeological findings. Have you got to read any of that shit, Eric? That is.
Wait, did he just say, did you get to read any of that shit, Eric?
Yeah, he did.
You know what? I'm taking a drink for Kent says a curse word.
Yeah, I did not expect to hear that.
That is new for me. Okay. Sure, Kent. Do you think Eric has had time to read any of that shit? I will say, shit is a very good summarization of what the Archko volume is. Or volumes? I don't know. Yeah, Thylacoli and Kennedy also thought so. Okay, so Tesla Ranger did too. Alright, so it's not just me that heard Ken say, have you had a chance to read that shit? Okay, cool. Great. Kent swearing. That's a new one.
Awesome. I read you the passage about the Christmas, didn't I? That whole thing is about the arch. Anyway. Well,
yeah, Ken, it would be really cool if it wasn't a 19th century forgery. That's the thing. Right? Do any of these texts in the Archko volumes actually have documentary evidence that say that they go back to like the 1st or 2nd century, or even the 3rd or 4th? No, they don't.
Off track here. So, just like Herod tried to kill all of the kids, killed them all just to be sure to get the right one, Satan has decided he's going to kill every human being on the planet to try to, be sure he gets the right one.
Okay, but Kent, the right one already came and went. What's...
Also, he's doing a pretty bad job with how many people we have on Earth.
Right? Yeah, Satan is really bad at this. But it's sort of like, I don't know, like, let's say I already got malaria. So now my decision is I'm going to kill as many mosquitoes as possible to prevent myself from ever having had malaria. Like, it doesn't work that way. I already got it. No matter how many mosquitoes I kill now, I will have always have had malaria.
Yeah, in cause and effect, the cause will always come before the effect.
What about, we're forgetting about tachyon.
I did forget about tachyons. I'm sorry.
Only because
Never
they
mind,
probably
chat.
don't exist.
That is why I forgot. But I
Oh.
like Star Trek, and they're in Star Trek, so I
They
should
are
remember.
in Star Trek. Yeah. You always got to check with the polarity of the tachyon field. Very important. Why didn't Vladimir says, why didn't Satan torpedo Noah's Ark? So the thing is, what powers Satan has are very nebulous in Kent's world, right? Like, sometimes he's in control of, like, all the governments of the world and all of the academics, and, like, he can, I guess, I don't know, he can possess any PhD who isn't already a Christian, and he's in charge of the one world order that's gonna drain the adrenaline out of all the kids and take over the world and make us all eat bugs or something. But then other times, Satan is like a big old goof who can't do anything. And it's a very confusing thing. Now, to be fair, the character of Satan really does, in many places and many religious traditions, like, vacillate between ancient evil overlord of all that is evil and a really weird goofball. Like, it happens in Islam, right? In Islam, Shaitan, or Iblis, who's the direct equivalent to Satan in Christianity, he's, the source of all sorts of evil things that happen in the world, but also sometimes he crawls up your nose. Which is why you should shove some water up there and then blow it back out to get Satan out of your nose. And then sometimes if you sleep in, it's because Satan pissed in your ear. So, he's just being a little bit of a goofball playing pranks to make you sleep in by urinating in your ear. It's like, okay, that's a interesting combination of traits.
It's never happened to me before.
You've never woken up late?
I've never had my ear be urinated in.
Well, have you ever woken up late?
I suppose so.
Then you
but there
have
was
had
no
your ear
urine in my
urinated.
ear.
Well, that's not how Satan urine works. It just absorbs in and makes you sleepy.
You say so.
Yeah. So anyone who's ever slept in, you got Satan piss in your ear.
To thwart or upset God's plans. Satan decided to destroy every seed of the woman to save his own skin. He knew God could not tolerate sin.
So if he eliminates all the humans, doesn't that eliminate all the rest of the sin?
It seems like it.
Okay. All right. Sure, Kent.
So he worked hard to make man sin, so God would have to destroy his own creation.
Oh, I get it. He wants God to do his work for him, because Satan is lazy and doesn't want to kill people directly, even though allegedly, apparently, according to this, he could. Instead, he's going to work in the background and make people, I don't know, be mean to each other, and, I guess according to Kent, get abortions. And therefore, God's going to kill everyone. Even though in the Bible he promised not to do that again, at least until the very end of time, which isn't necessarily a punishment as it is a final judgment. So none of this makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
right.
The thing is, like, Kent, you could have an internally consistent theology. Like, that's at least logically possible. But Kent has decided not to. He was like, you know what? Internal consistency, that's for other people.
Make them corrupt if possible. Genesis 6:5. God saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart.
But I do want to point out that this is an explicit time in the Bible where God changes his mind. So I don't know if that's going to become relevant later. But yeah, Genesis definitely depicts a God who changes his mind. And so does, much of the rest of the Bible, right? Like, the entire story of Jonah is about God changing his mind about the destruction of Nineveh on the basis of these people of Nineveh and their king repenting of all their wicked ways. So, like, God in the Old Testament is not someone who doesn't change their mind. They definitely come up with new ideas on the basis of new things that have happened. Savage Cobra, the Ediacaran vertebrate for 199 says, Satan wants to drain our precious bodily fluids. Great Dr. Strangelove reference. Love it. Roshan of Hakugod's Minion Keller for 499 says, I could use some of that Satan urine right now. I am so tired. You know what? I should come up with like a brand of like chamomile tea and call it Satan piss. Right? You just drink it before bed.
It'll knock you out.
Maybe I can sell it at like a dispensary, and it can be like infused with some CBN infused chamomile tea. It's called Satan piss. It's actually not the worst idea I've ever had.
It's not a bad idea. No.
Yeah, maybe I should. Okay. I'm gonna look into how that would work. Glenn Hovind, for full relation, who's been a member for 29 months, is at the amulet level, says, as God exists outside space-time, he also exists outside of human expectations of consistency, since he is not bound by the same rules as us. I mean, look, that's at least a plausible way to interpret this, although I would then say that if he exists outside of time, then changing his mind shouldn't mean anything, because he should always have just one eternal. I guess it could go either way.
And the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I have created, from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air.
I want to point out that the creeping things are explicitly the things that AIG says don't have to be on the ark, even though the text of the Bible very explicitly says that they are the things, among the things that God intends to kill. Oh, there's Mothra. We'll take a drink from Mothra. Thanks, Mothra. And also that those are among the things that, in fact, died during the flood. Got a couple super chats here. Flying Finished Sock says, maybe Kent Hovind thinks Satan is trying to thwart the second coming, which would be the final ass whooping. Also, remember to use your socks to lick and share. Whoops. I don't see how Satan killing everyone would thwart the second coming. Because, I mean, the second coming is not something that's supposed to be contingent on, like, how many people. At least not in any reading I've ever seen. So, I don't know. And then Glenn Hogan, full relation for 200 Argentinian pesos, says, Satan Piss would unironically be an awesome name for any hard liquor. Ooh. Okay, but I'm also trying to keep it, like, somewhat compatible with, like, like, Islamic folktales and whatnot. And I don't think I want to do that with an alcoholic beverage. That seems like a dicey proposition. But then again, it's not like I'm expecting a whole lot of Muslim customers to buy something called Satan Pit. So.
For it repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Lord always has somebody. Remember when the prophet thought he was the only one alive that was serving God? He ran away, from Jezebel and ran for about 100 miles, I believe. Finally stopped under a juniper tree, and he's feeling bad, feeling sorry for himself. And
then he made some gin with the juniper berries. Definitely in the Bible, guys. There's as much in the Bible as the snake in the Garden of Eden being Satan. So this is how my interpretation of the Bible. After stopping under the juniper berry tree, or the juniper tree, I guess, he gathered some berries and made gin. Let's see. Savage Cobra, the Ediacaran vertebrate for $4.99 says, women are far more familiar with the second coming than men. Oh, thanks. Oh, man. This is supposed to be a family-friendly show, you guys.
the Lord said, hey, Elijah, I've got 7,000 that have not bowed the knee. You're not the only one. And about the time you feel like I'm the only one that loves God, there's a lot of people out there that love God. I'm an independent, temperamental, fundamental, right-wing, radical Baptist, but I'll be the first.
Oh, you forgot chicken eating, Kent. What are you going to eat if it's not chicken?
First one to say, there are some Lutherans that love God, and some Methodists, and some Presbyterians.
You going to include Catholics?
Yes.
Ooh. Will he even mention any Eastern groups of Christians, like the Eastern Orthodox Church, the Oriental Orthodox Church, the Nestorian
Not
Church?
A chance.
No? Okay. I shouldn't say the Nestorian Church. Their more proper name is the Church of the East. Sorry, Church of the East, everybody. My apologies.
And there are all kinds of denominations where there are folks that really, really love God and are really going to heaven.
Okay, so he skipped over, but he left it open. So, yes and no.
Now they have to join the Baptist Church when they get there, but they do get to go.
That landed? Ugh.
They do get to go to heaven. So, after the flood, Satan got right back to work corrupting people. It didn't take him but 100 years or so, and Nimrod comes along and decides, hey, God said spread out, take over the world. No, we're staying right here. I'm going to lead my kingdom. And he built the Tower of Babel, to get a new world order. Lots of folks have tried.
Okay, so nowhere in the Bible is this depicted as something that Satan is doing, or anyone other than the people involved, right? So the narrative goes that the people found a place in the plains of Shinar, which is probably somewhere in the Middle East, to settle down and build a city. Then they started creating a great tower to reach to heaven, so that their names would live forever, and granting them a morsel of the immortality that God had denied them earlier in the garden. This is another story about humans trying to get to themselves something that God considers part of his divine prerogative only for himself and his council, right? The knowledge of good and evil, which is... So there's this thing that happens in Hebrew a lot, right? Where you get like the heavens and the earth, good and evil. And both of these are things where basically you're looking at the extreme ends of some spectrum and then including everything between it. So in Hebrew, there's no one word that means like cosmos or universe or something. Instead, the phrase the heavens and the earth covers everything, right? Because if it's not on earth and it's not in the heavens, then it's nowhere. Similarly, good and evil is not just a phrase that means things that are morally upright and things that are morally bad. It's a phrase like heaven and earth that encompasses basically knowledge of more or less everything, right? So the idea is that humans, in gaining this knowledge of good and evil, have gained the capacity to just learn about all the things around them in the world, which is something that gods have. And so while the gods might have a greater access, people, seek to use various divination methods to ask the gods about what the holds for them, humans have at least some modicum of that capacity. And by trying to get a modicum of immortality by having their names remembered, they are then trying to get the other part of divinity, which is why God smacks them down, which is why in the book of Genesis, God says that if they do this, they will be capable of anything. So he goes down and confuses their language. Not because they were disobeying his order to spread out. It doesn't say that anywhere in the Bible. Instead, the explicit reason that God uses in Genesis for confusing the languages at the Tower of Babel is because he doesn't want the humans to become too much like the gods. Now, Joshua Geese has just gifted 10 Dapper Dinosaur memberships. Thank you so much. We will take 10 drinks. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10.
This Tower of Babel, shortly after the flood. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us when, okay? You can get a few clues together and say probably within the first 200 or 300 years is when the Tower of Babel incident took place.
Okay, hold on, I need to look at this. Roman Catholic, which, okay, well, we're taking a drink for, mentioning that guy who was in charge in Germany. Right there on the slide, you guys can't see it, but that last arrow at the top says Hitler's Third Reich. So we're dividing history into sections. So we have Nimrod and the Tower of Babel near the beginning of the post-flood era. Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar, the Roman Empire. Then for some reason, Roman Catholic extends all the way from like the first. He's got 0 on there, so take a drink for having the year 0 on your timeline, Kent. So apparently the Roman Catholic Church didn't get into the 21st century. So all of you guys who think you're Catholic, you're wrong. There is no Catholic Church anymore. It ended sometime in the 1900s, according to Kent. This chart is complete. I have no idea what I'm supposed to be looking at here.
Some people have speculated that when the Bible says in the days of Peleg, the earth was divided, that's talking about divided by languages. Some people think in the days of Peleg, the earth was divided as in they decided, hey, there's so many folks, we better survey the property and see who gets what. Divide the land up. This is your part, this is my part. Let's put up a few fences here, or put some borders up, okay? Some people think the continents moved. I don't buy that for a second, because if you move a continent 6 inches, it kills everybody on the world.
Kent comes out against catastrophic plate tectonics. You know what, Kent? You're right. For one of the only times that I've ever seen, you have a better understanding of what catastrophic plate tectonics would mean than pretty much any other creationist. Kent's right, yeah. Moving the continents like that would in fact kill everyone. Way to go, Kent. We'll take a drink for Kent getting it right.
You know, be a tidal wave, go around the world 10 times. And
no, whatever. there would be horrible tidal waves, but it wouldn't go around the world 10 times.
Kill everybody. So I don't think that's possible. But some people really hold to that theory that the continents moved away from each other. And that would be, I think, tough to explain physically. There's all kinds of theories. We'll get into more of that later when we get into what's on video number 6 on our Hovind theory about the flood. But
I love that this is CSE 103, Class 4, and after all of that, we still haven't gotten through his 10 video series. There's already been a CSE 101 and 102, each of which had like 10 plus episodes. Now we're in part 4 of Class 3, and there's a CSE 104. Savage Cobra, the Eddie Akar Invertebrate for 1999 says, I have to be up at 0300, so AIG is a bag of dicks and Kent Hovind is made of stupid. Good night, all. Good night to you two. And man, that was me this morning. I woke up at like 3:31 or something. Started doing all that audio, which is now rendering. Which, hey, let's check in and see how Sheepit says I'm doing on that, right?
Good night.
Yeah, have a good night. Sleep well. Or don't, I guess. Sleep however you want. I'm assuming you want to sleep well.
Sleep well.
All right, we're rendering frames 48,001 through 72,000, and we are about a little less than a quarter done with those. So, there we go. There are 94,000 something frames in total. I actually just recently thought about it, and I might actually be the person who has rendered more frames of dinosaurs in CG than anyone else in history. It might be me. Because I render tens of thousands routinely. So, I don't know if it's for certain, but it would be hard to go past the area where I am in terms of just rendering CGI dinosaurs. Like the original Jurassic Park, it has like less than 10 minutes worth of CGI dinosaur. Yeah.
Tower of Babel was the first attempt after the flood to create a one world government.
I guess if you're conceiving this as the only city that exists on the whole planet, and it has a king, then yeah, I guess that's a one world government. But like, it's not like the king of like that city would have been able to effectively project power in, say, like Alaska or like South Africa or something, right? Like, calling that a one world government, even in the narrative, is a bit of a stretch, Kent. Plus, I also want to point out that at the time of the narrative, and even possibly at the time of composition, many places were still city-states. And the idea of, like, a global spanning empire was not really conceived of. Also, the scope of the world was much smaller. Because most people at the time didn't know things like that the world was round and much, much bigger than they thought.
Then God divided them up by languages. They spread out, which is probably the best thing ever happened to humanity.
Sure, whatever. I would say that, like, the invention of the wheel, the discovery and ability to use fire, vaccines, that all of these are better than having multiple languages and moving around. But, hey, maybe I'm wrong.
Because you just can't get everybody together to develop a one-world government. It's really tough. The language barrier has kept it from happening.
Oh. Is Kent not aware of translators and the ability of humans to learn more than one language? Like,
No, you can only know one language. That's it.
That's it.
It's a rule.
I'm going to take a drink for this. Like, oh man, two people don't speak the same language. How are they ever going to communicate? Yeah, Kent, great question. I don't know. I think only an American could think this. I think that's part of it, right? Because Americans are, like, notoriously to be very monolingual and to have only the most basic of knowledge of any other language, even ones that are very common around them. Like, many Americans, a group of people who live in a country where a huge swath of the population has Spanish as their first language, know barely any Spanish. They can say, like, hello and thank you in Spanish, and that's about it. And, like, other than that, it's just English. Maybe they know how to say, like, hello and thank you in a couple other languages. French or something. Glenn Hovind, full relation for 200 Argentinian pesos, says, "Do you hear about Glyptodon in Argentina that was butchered 20,000 years ago? Do you think they did it under the orders of this king? Or maybe it was a for his ziggurat?" Yeah, obviously. Yeah, that's the only explanation, is these ancient American people from 20,000 years ago were butchering a glyptodont in honor of King Nimrod of Babel fame. So, yeah, it turns out that in most of the world, people have to get along in like 2 or 3 languages, and while they don't become completely fluent, like it's their first language, for most of those languages, their first language, they still manage to communicate with people who don't speak their first language. It's very, very common. Yeah, like there are places right now in Europe where pretty much everyone speaks English, even though it's no one's first language. So yeah, like this can only be a problem of the level that Kent thinks it is if you are part of a relentlessly monolingual culture, which Kent is, being an American, which is annoying because ultimately it's not that hard to learn a language. It's work, right? I'm not going to tell you it's not work. It takes time, it takes dedication, it takes work. But it's not some insurmountable thing that you can't overcome. And I hear people say, like, well, I'm really bad at learning language. Maybe you are. Maybe you are. But the existence of entire countries where no one really seems to have that problem seems to indicate to me that really what's most likely happening is that you're not aware of the techniques and the level of effort it takes to learn another one, which isn't the same.
So even though, you speak Russian and some people, and you work with people all day long, speak different languages, I know it's frustrating, but it's probably the best thing God could have done, to keep us from killing ourselves a long time ago.
Yeah, people who speak different languages never kill each other. I don't know a
They
guy
work together
who's,
so well when they can't communicate.
Hey, here's a fun thing. I went to a funeral for a guy who was murdered specifically because he didn't speak English very well. Someone took offense to that, so when he went out for a smoke break, stabbed to death. So I know firsthand, or I guess secondhand, that just not being able to speak the same language doesn't prevent violence. There's a little kid right now. Well, I guess now he's not a little kid. There was a little kid, like 3-year-old kid, didn't have a father, because it turns out that sometimes not speaking the same language is a cause for violence.
It would have been a world dictator a long time ago.
No, I'm going to drink for that one. That's a lot.
Had it not been for that. So then you have Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar comes along as the first world ruler.
The Babylonian Empire never came close to ruling the entire world, Kent. What are you talking about? I mean, granted, he had titles like the King of Kings that implied his great rulership over the world, but that was always hyperbole. That was never actually true, literally. Kent's really starting to annoy me today.
Yeah, he's on a new level.
Yeah. Like, this is not the most vile he's been. It's not the dumbest he's been, but it's just like... Well, usually when he's really dumb, it's about a bunch of science stuff that you have to know at least a few things to really figure out. But this is stuff where it's just like, have you been alive on Earth for any length of time? You will have noticed why none of this makes sense. This isn't how people act. And, like, I kind of wonder, what world does Kent live in? Is he just in his own little isolated bubble where he doesn't interact with anyone who doesn't think just like him?
He pretty much is.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
In this little compound he has.
Yeah. I remember him trying to maintain innocence while also trying to get a pardon from President Trump. That was weird. Not realizing that accepting a pardon is an admission of guilt.
Whoops.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Fearmonger points out, I mean, he thinks Job was from China. He may actually think the Babylonian Empire was global. Okay, that is a great point. Yeah. I still can't believe that Kent thinks that Job might have been from China because the Bible describes him as being, quote, from the East. Which can only mean China. Maybe Japan. Who knows?
Right.
I have a friend in Japan right now, and she keeps sending me all these cool photos, and I'm like, man, I'm jealous. I wish I was from Japan. But hey, we're gonna take a quick break. We're gonna come back with fresh drinks, and so this is a great opportunity for anyone who needs to grab yourself a snack, grab yourself a beverage, grab yourself a bathroom break, whatever you need. We'll be back as soon as we can, and we will continue on with this Kenthoven nonsense, where Kenthoven fundamentally just misunderstands the very basics of what it means to be a human. So, and hopefully, I won't have any more stories to tell about times I went to funerals for murder victims. Don't actually like telling those stories. So, yeah. All right, here we go. Okay, we are back. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for sticking with me. Oh, it actually looks like we gained some viewers while I was on. Maybe the vice presidential debate is getting boring, which, I mean, I expect it was always boring, because it's a vice presidential debate. Who the vice president is largely meaningless. Although, watching J.D. Vance try to order donuts was weirdly awkward. Like, how do you turn an exercise in buying donuts into one of the weirdest, cringiest things I've seen since The Office was canceled? I don't know.
Ooh. That sounds rough.
Yeah, it was pretty rough. J.D. Vance is basically he seems like he's some kind of like robot who isn't quite sure how to be a human, but he's picked the worst role models possible to like base it on. It's like if Data, instead of like basing his ideas on how to be human off of people like Picard and Riker and Beverly Crusher and Geordi, was like, what if I based my personality on Harry Mudd and Cyrano Jones? It's like, yeah, that's an option, I suppose.
Or Alexander Rozhenko.
Oof. Yeah, no. Although he's not entirely a human, he's mostly Klingon. Despite the name.
That's true. I think he's 3/4 Klingon.
Yep, 3/4. His mom was half human, half Klingon, and Worf is a 100% Klingon.
Yeah.
3/4 Klingon. Alright, here we go. Oh, Vadimirchenko says, Kent is marginally better than Karl Bob. Like, I don't think that he's any smarter than Karl Bob, but he's easier to understand. because Karl Baugh likes to go on these long, epic rants using absurd words, many of which he's made up himself, but all of which are like multisyllabic. And then when you like parse it out, it doesn't actually mean anything. It was just a whole series of like noun phrases with some prepositions thrown in for fun. And like he rarely actually gets to a main verb in any clause. And yeah, he's just very hard to follow. Whereas Kent, easy to follow, but also at least as dumb. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know which one of those is worse. They're definitely not the same though.
To conquer a large chunk of the world.
Oh, wait, I forgot my quick thing. Guys, help the channel out if you can afford it. There's a Patreon, there's channel memberships, you get early access to videos, you get access to the Discord server. Beth and I both have Patreons linked in the description. We also both have Amazon wishlist, and I have a merch store. So any of that would be great. Beth is also hungry, so if you want to get him a pizza, feel free to get him a pizza. Or just buy him some of the food from his wish list. Which might not solve the hungry now problem. Yeah, it won't help solve the hungry now problem, but it will help solve the same problem in the future. Which is also why I have some snacks on there. Like I've got beef jerky, sausage, ramen. There is rice on there, but we don't currently need rice. We currently are still at like, what is it, like 25 pounds or something of rice that we still have, something like that. Let's see. Glenn Hoban, full relation, for 200 Argentinian pesos, says, JD, good friend of mine, he's a Nephilim of old. He came back after 5,000 years to reinstate the post-Diluvian world government. Oh, so that's what a Nephil, I guess, Nephil looks like. Because I don't want to say a Nephilim, because Nephilim is plural. Masculine plural ending in Hebrew is like cherubim, one cherub, two cherub, well, three cherubim, because there's a
What?
dual number in Hebrew.
On an unrelated note, what is the plural for crucifix?
Is the what for crucifix?
Plural form.
Oh, I believe it's crucifixi. I think technically in Latin would be crucifixi, but that sounds stupid.
Okay.
I don't know.
Just checking.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I've never really had to talk about more than one crucifix at a time.
I've been playing Phasmophobia.
Oh, okay.
So I'll carry 2 with me at a time.
There you go. All right. Yeah, I guess we'll check dictionary.com. Check. Dictionary.com. And we'll type in crucifix. Crucifix. Give me the plural. Come on, dictionary. Help me out here. Any cross. At least it tells me what it is in gymnastics. Alright, we'll just type in crucifix, plural. Crucifixes. What Britannica's giving.
Crucifixes. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Wikipedia's also saying crucifixes. Crucifixes from chat. Yeah, crucifixes. Yeah, my guess is that crucifixes didn't sound well. It didn't sound very good, and so English like, nah. We're not going with that.
All right.
Oh, but it does remind me, one of my pet peeves is when people who are doing like Blender tutorials on YouTube say vertices and then vertice as the singular of vertices as a vertex. Or the opposite, will they say vertex and then they'll say vertexes. And it's like, geez, everybody. 1 vertex, 2 vertices. Just please stop.
Just learn it. Learn it and know it.
I know.
There's an interesting story in the book of Daniel. If you're going to study prophecy, what's going to happen in the future?
I hope he at some point talks about Bel and the Dragon, which is part of the longer ending of Daniel from late Septuagint manuscript. Because if anything, it's like right in line with this whole idea about like there being dinosaurs and maybe the Babylonians were worshiping dinosaurs. He should love Bel and the Dragon, but it's not part of his Bible, so I don't know.
You really need to start with Daniel, and then study Revelation. It's like the 2 books go together.
It's almost like the author of the Revelation of St. John had read the book of Daniel and was writing a new work in the same genre of apocalyptic literature. Take a drink for this. It's amazing how the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation are similar to each other. Oh, okay. Oh, man. Oh. Poor Kent. He's... You know what? Bless his heart. That's all I got. Bless his heart.
God told Daniel to write this book. When Daniel got done, he said...
Okay, Daniel did not write that book. The Book of Daniel is a post-exilic work that is not written contemporaneously. It was not written by Daniel. Even in the internal narrative, Daniel is spoken of in the third person, which means it probably wasn't written by Daniel. It doesn't even purport to be written. Was there a real character Daniel? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe. Oh, Vishanti. Vishanti likes my bless his heart. It's the only appropriate response I can have to Ken being amazed that the Book of Revelation and the Book of Daniel have similarities. I don't know what else to say.
Said, Lord, what does this mean? The Lord said, Daniel, don't worry about it. Put the pen down. This is for the next. Somebody else will finish this up.
No, okay. What it means was very obvious to the audience at the time. You have a giant statue that represents various different empires. And one of the reasons that we think that this is a post-exilic book is because the empires involved basically go up to, I believe, like the Seleucid period. Or maybe just before. And they're very easy to connect to various empires that had conquered or attempted to conquer what's now like Israel, Palestine. And so it was a book about God's judgment on the people who had, up until the point of after the exile, variously oppressed the Hebrew, Israelite, whatever now collective noun you care to use in this case, community. And then that same kind of theme is picked up in a similar work about, 2nd century persecutions of Christians as an exhortation to stay faithful. Sorry. In a similar way that the Book of Daniel was an exhortation to people to stay faithful to the God of Israel. Because, remember, a lot of stuff in the Book of Daniel is about how Daniel flourishes as a result of his faithfulness, even though there were all these pressures to fall away from the worship of the God of Israel. Right? That's why he ends up in places like the Lion's Den, because he decides to stay faithful to the... These are both books written about persecution from people who were currently experiencing some of that persecution. Both are exhorting the communities to which they're written to stay faithful to their worship practices. Their cultural identity is defined in part by these cultural practices. And one is written with full awareness of the content of the other. So, of course, they're similar. This is not extraordinary. This doesn't require some kind of supernatural belief. It doesn't require anything out of the ordinary. And it doesn't mean anything for Kent's view of history. Sorry, I got a bit of a cough all of a sudden. Glenn Hogan, full relation, for 200 Argentinian pesos, says crucifix doesn't come from the third declension Latin noun like vortex, vortices. It's actually a second declension masculine crucifix, crucifixi. Ooh, which explains that Spanish crucifijo. Oh, well, there you go. I did not ever look into the etymology of crucifix. Thank you very much. Now, I'll go for a little bit. There's a fair chance I'll forget that. Sorry. Here we go.
And then John comes along on the Isle of Patmos, 600 years later, and finishes the Revelation. So Daniel and Revelation go together and should be studied together. But here's the story.
Okay, look, I've said it many times. There is a reason that for well over 1,000 years, Christian churches did not read the Book of Revelation in church. Because when you get too deep into that nonsense, you start coming up with all sorts of crazy stuff. And they knew it. Because it happened back then. There's a reason that many Eastern Christians were reluctant to even include it in their Bibles. It's exactly because of the nonsense Kent gets up to, where he writes a book all about how his interpretation of the apocalyptic literature of Revelation is actually a prophecy for our time, not just a book about Christians staying faithful through persecution in the early first millennium. No. It's a blueprint for what's about to happen. It's how you get into all sorts of weird conspiracy theories, including many of the anti-Semitic conspiracy theories that, while Kent likes to pretend he doesn't believe in, he sure peddles the source books for a lot of them.
In Daniel chapter 2, in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams, wherein his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him. Then the king commanded to call the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, the Chaldeans, for to show the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king. And the king said unto them, I have dreamed a dream, and my spirit was troubled to know the dream. Then spake the Chaldeans to the king in Syriac, O king, live forever. Yeah, that'd be a wonderful thing, wouldn't it? They all say that. They don't really mean it.
Okay, Kent, do you have a point? Why are we hearing this story?
They will hope he dies so they can be king.
No, Kent, they don't hope he dies so they can be king. None of them were in line for being the next king. Who do you think they were? Jeez, I'm taking another drink.
What is he even talking about?
Yeah, King Nebuchadnezzar is going to die, and then just some random soothsayer is going to become the next king. That's super likely.
Right. O king, live forever. Tell thy servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. And the king answered and said to the Chaldeans, The thing is gone from me. I don't remember the dream. And if ye will not make known unto me the dream with the interpretation thereof, ye shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made a dunghill. In other words, you are in trouble, fellas, okay? And of course, you know the story. They couldn't tell the dream, so the king decided to start killing all the wise men. These guys are a bunch of fakes anyway, and they were. And along comes Daniel. Yeah, Daniel's in an unusual situation here. He and 7,000 of his schoolmates have been taken away from...
Schoolmates is not the word I would have used, but sure, whatever. I would have used, like, countrymen, patriots, comrades. I don't know.
Their home, taken away from their country. Probably their families were killed. Thousands and thousands were killed. They bring them to Babylon. These kids are all teenagers, 16, 17, 18 years old, roughly.
Doesn't say that, but sure, whatever. They were probably young men, now I'll give them that. Which means that interpretation isn't crazy, but whatever.
They make them eunuchs. Look that up in the dictionary.
Everyone knows what a eunuch is. If you guys don't know what a eunuch is, please let me know.
They give them different clothing to wear, make them learn a new language.
Wait, Kent, I thought you couldn't learn new languages. I thought that once people spoke different languages, that was it. They just couldn't interact with each other. They couldn't conquer each other. They couldn't form a one-world government. Now here's Kent telling me that, oh, people can just learn new languages? What is this, Kent? I'm taking a drink for Kent not noticing that he just blithely contradicted many of his previous statements about why the Tower of Babel worked.
Busted, Kent.
And subject them to slavery. I mean, you have zero authority, zero rights. I mean...
that is not entirely true. In fact, in the ancient world, slaves were often given the authority of their masters, owners, in order to conduct business on behalf of their master. And so, the slave of a powerful man could themselves actually end up being a very powerful person in that area. Now, that doesn't make them not a slave. It doesn't make them free. It still makes them their property of their owner, legally speaking. It's still an aberrant thing to do. But it's just ahistorical to say that slaves don't have any authority. Never did. They very frequently, well, a small subset of them, very frequently had all sorts of authority. So, yeah.
What future do you have?
I mean, you've got a life in which you can do things, you can enjoy food and drink and music, and you have friends and all. I mean, your life isn't over because you're like the king of Babylon's eunuch slave. Obviously, because people persisted in that position for their whole, well, for, a long time, right? Like, it's not good. It's not something we should still do. It's something that should be condemned as a horrible human rights violation. But, like, not the end of your life. There are still reasons to keep going.
Daniel decides, hey, I'm going to make the best of a bad situation. I'm going to try to do the best I can.
Okay, so Kent does know that it's not the end of your life, and there is something after that. Okay, cool. Thanks, Kent.
Sometimes you get yourself in a situation where you say, okay, I'm here. What do I do? Let's just do the best with what we got. Other people get in a bad situation. They get falsely accused. They end up in jail. And they get bitter. Some people get better. Some get bitter.
That was a joke that didn't land. Take a drink.
Joseph in the Bible is a good example. He's falsely accused by his master's wife. Here he has already been sold by his brothers to be a slave. Things aren't going too well for.
Hey, speaking of slaves with a lot of power, didn't Joseph become the vizier of all of Egypt according to the Bible, meaning that he was basically the man who had the authority of Pharaoh, the god king of the entire society, despite still being a slave to Pharaoh? Weird. It's almost like the Bible contradicts Kent's previous claim about how slavery worked in the past.
Joseph in life, ends up in jail for 13 or 17 years. I think he was 17 when he went, and he was in for 13 years, 30 altogether. 13 years in jail for doing nothing wrong. Decided, hey, let's make the best of it. Sometimes you just have to get yourself that attitude of, okay, things aren't going well, let's do the best we can. Johnny Erickson Tada, what, she's 17 or 18 years old, dove in, broke her neck.
No idea who this person is. Anyone? Maybe this is a story that people knew back in, like, given, like, late 90s or early 2000s or something.
Paralyzed, waist down. Neck down, yeah, neck down. What am I going to do? Well, let's learn how to type and let's write books. All you can do is move your head, put a pencil in your mouth and type. Hey, okay, you can get bitter about it if you want, but you might as well get better and hey.
I mean, look, I actually do agree with Ken to some extent, where it's like, whatever is going on in your life, you have something ahead of you, right? Like, being paraplegic, quadriplegic, it's not the end of your life. Being in a situation where someone is pressing you isn't the end of your life. You have something to live for. You can still do things. You can still have enjoyment in your life. You can still have something that fulfills you. And it is not, in fact, a good idea to give up. If you're in a situation right now where you feel like you need to give up, here's me telling you, you don't. You have people who care about you. You have people who will miss you. Have things to look forward to. So I don't want to disagree with Kent about that. I just don't know how it matters to Kent. So if you are in that situation where you're not sure if you have anything left to live for, you do. Have things to live for. So go keep living.
And she paints, yeah. And has a radio program, Sweet, godly spirit. Anyway.
I mean, hey, good for her. I'm glad that after becoming paralyzed from the neck down, that she was able to do things that were fulfilling for her, and that's, legitimately good for her. I just don't understand why Kent is what it's supposed to.
So Daniel then comes in and says, hey, king, I can not only tell you what the dream was, I can tell you what it means. Now, as you read Daniel chapter 2, it's interesting. Daniel really gives a good testimony for the Lord. He said, it's not in me, O king. The God in heaven, who rules everybody, including you, has told me.
Wait, there's a jingling noise when I speak?
I think it's a cricket.
It is a cricket. Darn it. I don't know how to fix that.
This dream. Nebuchadnezzar didn't like the idea of anybody telling him what to do, but Daniel, little Daniel, this eunuch servant boy, is about to tell the king a message from God. I love this chapter. We'll take that up after a quick break.
Wait, now there's an electronic buzz when I speak? Bender, you getting any buzz other than cricket when I speak?
I just hear cricket.
Huh. Well, that would mean if it's not the cricket that it's an OBS problem, which I don't know why that would happen. Filters here. Oh. Well, okay, so I might later record some cricket audio and see what the peak wavelength is, and then see if I can just suppress that wavelength. That usually can get rid of it. There's very loud crickets outside. Yeah, Lubalar says you can't fix crickets. Yeah, you can't really. So, sorry. Was Daniel a eunuch, says Glenn Hope in full relation. I don't remember a story about Daniel becoming a eunuch, but also, I don't want to say that that's not in there because I don't honestly remember the beginning of the book of Daniel well enough. So if anyone who does, or anyone wants to double check with that, then I would appreciate that. I don't remember that being part of the story, but like I said, I don't remember it that well enough to say that that's definitely not.
Daniel chapter 2. Well, let's take up again here. Let's talk about Nebuchadnezzar's dream, what Daniel interpreted for him, and see how it ties into us today. Here's the go, Daniel chapter 2, verse 31. Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. The image's head was of fine gold, his breast and arms of silver, his belly and thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. thou sawest till that a stone was cut out of the mountain, cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet, that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces. So the statue that he saw is basically the head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of brass, legs of iron, and feet of iron and clay mixed together. This was symbolic of the next 5 great kingdoms to come on earth. Later on, if you read the book of Daniel, Daniel says, Nebuchadnezzar, thou art the head of gold. Now it's interesting, each of these metals, gold, silver, brass, iron and clay, become less valuable.
Yeah.
Gold is the most valuable.
Remember how this is all about how Satan is trying to, like, control the world and defeat God? And now we're off on some weird tangent about, like, the statue from Daniel?
Yeah, I don't know why.
I am
where he's going with
completely
this.
baffled by this. Yeah, I'll tell you what, guys. If we don't get out of, like, Kent Hovind weird Bible story hour by the end of this, I might just go ahead and get class 5 for the next time and skip the rest of class 4. Because I have no idea what any of this is supposed to have to do with how old the Earth is, why evolution is fake, what Satan is supposed to be up to. I just don't get what I'm supposed to get out of this. And now I get what his audience is supposed to get out of it, right? That makes sense to me. I don't get what I'm supposed to get out of any of this.
And Nebuchadnezzar had the most pure form of dictatorship, I guess. I mean,
What does that mean? Okay, maybe Kent's going to tell us what it means to be a pure form of dictatorship.
he was the law. They didn't vote on anything.
So absolute monarchy. And we already have a phrase for that. It's absolute monarchy. You can just say absolute monarchy. Or he was an absolute monarch.
All he had to do is decide, I want you to kill that guy right there. Yeah, but I'm going to appeal to who?
Whom? But okay.
To me? Okay. Well, hear the case again. You're still going to the prison or whatever. Nobody told him what to do. When you get to the arms of silver, you're talking about the Medo-Persian Empire, which.
Okay, we're going to take a quick drink. But would you like to know what the evidence is for the Medo-Persian Empire?
Yes, tell me all of it.
Cyrus the Great was called Cyrus the Mede in the Old Testament. That is the sum total for of evidence for the existence of this empire.
Okay.
There was no Medo-Persian Empire. There just wasn't. It's not a real thing. The Bible was just wrong about the ethnicity of Cyrus. Sorry.
Was the second great world empire. They wanted to rule the world, but their king was not an absolute dictator. I mean, they had laws, and he had to abide by the law. And even when the king decided, he was tricked, and they were going to throw Daniel in the lion's den and all this.
This is starting to get exhausting. I'm going to skip ahead. I am really, really, really tired of going through the book of Daniel. I just don't care. I mean, I do care, right? Because I like all this interesting Bible stuff and the context and all that stuff. But it's not what the show is supposed to be about, and so I just don't care. I'm sorry. Everyone was really anxious for the rest of Kent's interpretation of Daniel. You'll just have to find CSE 103 Class 4 on your own.
Let's go on here.
Okay, yes.
And in these days shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed.
And yet we're still in Daniel.
It's more of the same.
I'm taking a drink. I can't. Okay, we'll give him a few minutes and I might skip ahead again.
And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever.
Cool.
For as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it brake in pieces.
How are we still on the vision of King Nebuchadnezzar? Skipped again.
On board the ship was a guy named Captain Fitzroy. Fitzroy was one of those kind of guys that you do it my way or that, my way or the highway. Very intolerant of anybody who disagreed on anything.
Sounds like a ship's captain.
But he and Darwin had very interesting discussions on this topic. Darwin, though, at the same time he's gone this 5-year-long voyage, he's reading these books by Charles Lyell.
His buddy, yeah.
Somebody told me as a brand new Christian, gave me advice that somebody else had given years ago. He said, in 10 years, you're going to be the same person you are right now, except for the people you meet and the books you read. Read good books.
I mean, I guess I don't disagree. Yeah, you should generally read good books.
It'll change you into what you want to be. Read bad books, it'll make you a bad person. You read good books, it'll totally change. You know, the more you read of good stuff, the better off you are. So, Lyle read this book. He said that book.
Darwin read the book. Lyle wrote the book. Come on, Ken. It's like when Ken says that Timothy wrote 1st and 2nd Timothy.
Whoops.
Changed his life forever. Lyle also read a book by a guy named Thomas Malthus. So I want you to know for the quiz, 2 people that strongly influenced Charles Darwin. One was Charles Lyell, and the other was a guy named Thomas Malthus. Malthus had written a book in 1790, I think, I don't know, sometime back then. Malthus said, the population grows geometrically. You multiply, 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16, population takes off geometrically. The food supply can only grow arithmetically.
You mean linearly, Ken. Both of those are arithmetic. So I'm going to take a drink for that. And yeah, that was basically the thrust of Malthus's book, was that population grows much faster than the capacity to increase the food supply does, which creates a problem where there are too many mouths to feed and not enough food. Now, that has been the case in the past, but what Malthus failed to foresee, not necessarily through his own fault, but was that agricultural techniques would start to advance rapidly, and therefore be able to largely keep up with the growing population of the Earth for a very long time. Now, there is going to be some kind of ultimate carrying capacity for humans on Earth. There is a certain number of humans that the Earth certainly couldn't, support. Like, I doubt the Earth will ever be able to support 20 trillion people. I don't see how we can possibly do that. But we're probably not even close to the actual carrying capacity, taking into account modern food production. And so, yeah, Thomas Malthus was wrong about that in regards to humans. But what Charles Darwin got from Malthus was this idea that population growth, if unchecked, will outstrip the resources in the environment to keep that population alive, at least all of them. And he was right about that for most organisms that aren't humans, because most organisms don't have the ability to invent new farming techniques to vastly expand their food production capacity. That's a human thing. You don't see tigers out there finding new breeding techniques for deer so that they can eat more next year. That's not how it works. So while Malthus was wrong about human society, the extension that Charles Darwin could draw from that into the rest of biology wasn't wrong, because that idea does apply to most organisms.
2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. See, 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2, 4 times, you end up with 2, 4, 6, 8. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, you end up with 16. Or 64.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I was going to say, wait, what? How does Ken think powers work? But
so, now Malthus was wrong, okay? As the population grows, there are more people available to plow the land.
that is not as simple as it gets, Ken. Right? Because the problem is the land doesn't also expand. The actual reason Malthus was wrong about humans, which again doesn't apply to other organisms, which is why it still works for Charles Darwin, is because of technological advance. Lord Crocosquirrel, who's been a member for 13 months, says Kent is more deranged than usual, it seems. Also, Godzilla is best kaiju, and sorry, not Godzilla, Ghidorah is best kaiju, and AIG is a bag of flesh-colored cucumbers, which should go in a salad. I don't think I want that salad, but I will take a drink. Sounds like a pretty bad salad that I don't.
But he's looking at it totally wrong. Malthus affected a lot of people back in those days. Basically, the idea was, look, there's going to be more people born than can possibly survive because the food supply is limited. That was his faulty thinking, but whether he's right or wrong at this point doesn't matter. The fact is, he did influence Charles Darwin. So Darwin thought, well, let's see, if more people are born than can possibly survive.
You know, Kent, when Charles Darwin was thinking about evolution, natural selection, and things like that, in prototype form, on the Voyage of the Beagle, he was not thinking about humans. That's why his book is not about humans. It doesn't even really mention them, except as the breeders of domesticated animals, which he uses as an analogy for natural selection. He's just thinking about organisms broadly. And when applied to non-human organisms, Malthus wasn't wrong. Heather, Schrodinger's fossil coon for $5 says, geometric and arithmetic are terms Malthus used. Geometric equals exponential and arithmetic linear. Well, sorry about that, Malthus. I was quick to correct Kent to linear, when in fact it was you using terms that I'm going to assume were current and pretty reasonable. So, my apologies to Thomas. Oh, Lord Crocus Squirrel says, that was supposed to be Mothra. Well, Mothra's pretty cool too. I know King Ghidorah is the bad guy, but I do like the design quite a lot, actually. And I also really like Mothra. So I don't know that I have a favorite among them.
Then the weakest are going to die off. Nature is going to select the strongest to survive and the weakest to die off. Anybody seen the movie The Christmas Carol? Charles Dickens, every Christmas they play.
I've seen like 3 different versions, Ken. Yes, I'm familiar with The Christmas Carol.
That thing. This was supposedly taking place set in the early or mid 1800s. When
it was supposed to be set around the time it was written.
Evolution was a popular theory, and the teachings of Thomas Malthus was still very influential. Remember when the Scrooge was asked the question, what about this person that's going to die, you know? And he said, well, let them die and decrease the surplus population. Remember that phrase in there? And later on, the Ghost of Christmas Present, or one of those, said, he repeated that back to him. Let them die and decrease the surplus population. Well, that is exactly what the thinking of the day was. Are
Hey.
there no workhouses? That's what that was. It's so classically true of that time period.
Yes, Kent. People in the past didn't care very much about the poor and downtrodden. And Charles Dickens was an exception. What's your point? That's the theme for today. Is what is your point, Kent? Why are you telling me this?
Because of Malthus's teaching that everybody can't live. So since everybody can't live, it's best if the weak ones die. Otherwise, the whole population becomes weak.
I mean, you can draw that from Malthus. I don't know that that was necessarily what I would call his point. But okay.
We really ought to have the weak ones die and the strong ones survive. Then the farmer, save the best ones for breeding and, sell off the worst ones. Sure. You want to develop your stock of whether it's tomatoes or apples or anything, you try to save the best.
Are we about to start tracing the history of eugenics? Like, is that what's going on here? Because, I will at least say that eugenics does, in fact, couch itself in, terms of evolutionary biology and natural versus artificial selection. Because basically, it's just attempting to use artificial selection on humans. Okay,
So in 1790, James Hutton's book began people on the trip of doubting that the earth is 6,000 years old, which, of course, made them doubt the Bible. A few years later, Charles Lyell comes along and makes people take away the flood. Then along came Charlie.
I love it how he says, it's the book that did it and not the evidence presented in the books. Right? I'm going to take a quick drink and we're going to talk about that. Right? So, Kent likes to think of things, ideas, evidence originating from a book. I'm opening my drink. And the reason for that is because, according to his theology, that's basically how you get truth, right? You check to see what does the book say, and you believe what the book says as you interpret it. Now, as we pointed out, Kent does not actually do that in point of fact. He actually imports a whole lot of extra biblical stuff, not just a hermeneutical framework, but even just stuff that just isn't in there. But that being said, his conception of himself is as someone who takes a look at the book, sees what it says, and then believes that. And so he is talking about these books as if they're just, quote, the Bible for atheists, even though Lyell wasn't an atheist, he was a Christian. I don't actually know about Hutton. So the real reason, though, that people took these books seriously is because they presented evidence in the books that could be checked on, right? So when Hutton and Lyell are talking about rock formations, if you don't believe them, you can just travel there. Now, maybe you might not be able to personally, but other people interested in geology, who are mostly, wealthy aristocrats, wealthy male aristocrats, could go check, right? And if he was wrong, they could eviscerate him in their book. But it turns out they weren't wrong. It was the physical evidence that convinced people. It's just that Hutton and Lyle were the people who were collecting this physical evidence, interpreting it in a way that seemed to make sense to them and to other people, presenting it in the book. The book itself doesn't really matter. But Kent doesn't have that kind of thought process. He can only think in terms of the book, because that's how his theology works. And I do want to point out that while it is a common way for theology to work in Protestant Christianity, it is certainly not universal in Christianity broadly. There's a reason why sola scriptura is seen as a Protestant distinctive.
Darwin, and he took away the Creator. Now, what we're going to study here is what happened since 1850, when it took about 10 years for evolution thinking to kind of permeate society. But boy, what happened after that? With the rise of communism, socialism, Marxism, it all ties together.
Yes, the Soviet Union and Communist China, countries famously embracing of evolution, while also causing mass famines by pretending that evolution and even basic genetics weren't real, and that plants had a class consciousness that would prevent them from competing for resources, which meant that you started planting crops right next to each other, without any space and without sufficient fertilizer, I suppose. And suddenly, oh no, a horrible famine, which brings us back to something that I mentioned to Ben out of the blue in the pre-show, which is the Holodomor, the attempt at genocide by starvation of the Ukraine by Russia, all because Russia was just like taking advice from farmers of the past. No. Evolution? No. Regular old just biology and genetics? No. Instead, we'll just steal all of the food from Ukraine. That'll be better. Yeah, definitely can see that line right through to communism, right from evolution. Definitely how it works. And of course, what says class solidarity and cooperative economics and, a class consciousness about the collective and the needs of the many, what says that more than natural selection and the competition for resources? There's a reason why when Darwin and evolution were kind of more or less banned in the Soviet Union, that it was because it seemed too capitalistic, because it concentrated on things like the struggle for survival and the strong dominating over the weak. Yeah, it's because it's actually really hard to go from the theory of evolution to communism as using evolution as your basis for it. Turns out evolution actually more easily lends itself to social Darwinism, which was like capitalism on steroids rather than communism. But Kent likes capitalism, so he's not going to draw the actual obvious connection between ideological capitalism and natural selection. He's not going to draw that connection. Glenn Hoban points out, you are not considering that evolution equals bad and communism equals bad, therefore, or thus evolution equals communism. You know what, you're right. I did not consider that point. It's...
And I don't think you can possibly understand history of the last 150 years and how it's going to affect you today.
And I don't think you can understand that history no matter what. You've given every impression that you are completely incapable of actually thinking about any of these. Instead, you just make connections, as Glenn Hoban said, between just things that you don't like, and you therefore think that they have the same underlying cause. Which they don't, at least not by and large.
Until you see how evolution ties into this. Some people thought, if there is no God and man evolved, then one color of man must be superior to the rest.
Which is stupid, because that's not how evolution works. Evolution is about branching, and the two sides of a branch in evolution, if they persist, one didn't evolve more than the other. They may have evolved differently, but yeah, evolution does not demand that if humans evolved in a branching pattern that resulted in races, which turns out they didn't, but even if they did, evolution doesn't necessitate that, therefore one of them is better than the others. They're just adapted differently to different environments. You can make a judgment call if you want to, but that's a thing you are doing, not that evolution is doing.
Which is how racism comes in.
Okay, I'm going to take a drink. We're going to talk about how racism the modern concept of a race was largely invented by Europeans as an effort to excuse the transatlantic slave trade. Now, before this, other excuses had been given for slavery. Right? Like in the Stoics, it just kind of sucks. Some people end up being slaves as a result of just bad luck, basically. Which is why you should treat slaves well, whether your own or other people's. Which I suppose is progressive for like ancient Rome and ancient Greece. Although I would say that you could also just opt not to take slaves. That's also an option there, Stoics. Not an option they bothered with, but whatever. But there was also ideas like that you get from Aristotle, where some people are just kind of they're sort of docile, and they're sort of just inherently slavey, which is I mean, I guess it's definitely worse than the Stoics. Not great. But the idea that these lines were to be drawn along like the lines of gross morphological features was something that was invented by Europeans as an excuse for the transatlantic, because they didn't really have any of the other options to fall back on easily. And it was primarily supported through two different methods. One was indeed what's sometimes called scientific racism, where there were attempts to show that people from Africa were less intelligent, or weaker, or in various ways closer to the brute animals than the Europeans. All of this was based on junk science. None of it holds up when you actually look at what's going on the ground in terms of biology and human diversity and whatnot. But the other big way, and the way that was most persuasive in many places like the United States, was in fact religious racism, in which the story of Noah's sons, including Ham, were used as a basis for racism, because the curse of Ham was associated with Africans who were supposed to be the descendants of Ham, and the Bible says that the descendants of Ham will be the slaves, his brothers. And so it was in fact the Bible that was in many places the persuasive element in taking this new idea of racism and making it a mainstream thing in that society. So while I'm not going to give a pass to the quote-unquote scientific establishment of the day, you also can't give a pass to the Bible. The Bible was at least as much of a problem in terms of the invention of not slavery, but racism as an excuse for slavery, as anything to do with science. And further, here's the thing, right? For the entire history of slavery, people have found ways to excuse slavery. And, spoiler alert, for most of that time, there was no such thing as Charles Darwin or the theory of evolution. They just came up with other reasons. So, really what's happening is people will come up with reasons for the horrible stuff they do, and sometimes it's going to be some kind of scientific principle. Sometimes it's going to be theological. Sometimes it's going to be philosophical. Sometimes it'll be political. Sometimes it'll be economic. Whatever. People who want to do horrible stuff are going to come up with an excuse to do that horrible stuff. Can't lay it at the feet of evolution. Further, it's evolutionary biologists who have confirmed quite conclusively that human races aren't a real thing.
Now, there's always been racism, okay? People have subjugated other folks because of their skin color.
That is absolutely not true. I'm going to think. Well, obviously, people notice different skin colors in the past. Just don't have evidence that it was the basis for like anything other than identifying people by different nationalities, right? Like, oh, you look like you're from Kush or Nubia or Egypt or Greece or Iberia or whatever. So, Vadim Radchenko says, in Orthodoxy, Ham, Japheth, and the other one, Shem, were justifying feudalism with Ham being the serf-feeding priests and rulers. I feel like that might work in Russia. I'm not sure if that would work in, say, like, the Jerusalem Patriarchate or, like, Constantinople, because those didn't have as traditionally feudal of a society. But yeah, I mean, people will use stories from the Bible to justify whatever social order they find themselves, right? Like, look right now. Nothing about the United States government is anything like any government described in the Bible. It's really not, right? Like, where in the Bible does it say that you should vote for presidents according to, like, state lines, and then those people are actually voting for electors who then go and elect the president? president who's going to serve a limited term. Like, none of this is in the Bible, which is why the founding fathers largely didn't reference the Bible when coming up with this. Instead, they referenced things like Roman Republic and ancient Greek democracies. And yet, you will find Christians today who are proclaiming that basically the Constitution is an inspired document that's on the same level as the Bible, which is why the Trump Bible has the Constitution in it. Like, you got to realize that that's a thing. But it's not true. There's nothing in the Bible that would ever lead you towards the form of government that the United States of America has. And yet there are people who will try to justify it on theological grounds. People will justify the system that they're living in by whatever means they find convenient, whether it be theological, philosophical, science.
But when you think you're God, then you get to make these kind of decisions. The Bible says clearly we're all descended from one family. There's no reason to be a racist. But
hey, props to Kent for saying that racism is dumb and stupid. I just wish that Kent would stop being blatantly racist on his own channel. Most recently, by telling the joke that his pigs ate so much Chinese food they were about to get slanted. And then when called out for that, he just doubled down on that actually being a good joke. So, I appreciate the lip service against racism, Kent. But when you do things like that, or you ask a native woman who you have on your campground or whatever, how many people she scalped, maybe the racism call coming from inside the house, Kent. Just maybe.
evolution would teach one race must be superior.
No, it doesn't teach that. That is a possible outcome of evolution if you're willing to make judgment calls. But it turns out it's certainly not something taught by evolution. You can simply make other judgment calls. And second, even if you do want to make that judgment call, it turns out that races aren't real in an evolutionary sense anyway. You don't have anything to judge between. You can't make a judgment between races that don't exist according to evolution.
Just like this Harold Rafton said, do humanists believe in a supreme being? Emphatically, yes. That supreme being is man. Humanists have no knowledge of any being more supreme. American humanist, this guy said, the turning point in history will be the moment that man becomes aware that the only God of man is man himself.
I'm going to take another drink because humanism, no matter what is true about it, is not the same thing as evolution. Watch. Hey, Benz.
What's that?
Think evolution is true?
Yes.
You a humanist?
No.
Well, there you go.
Yep, we're in trouble. I had a student tell me in a public school in Pennsylvania, he said he was an atheist. And I said, well, then how do you tell right from wrong? He said, well, I decide if something's right or wrong. He said, I'm the God of my own universe.
This sounds like a story that didn't happen. I'm just drinking for it. I don't think this is a... Now, I do think Kent was approached by an atheist student, and then Kent tried to use some kind of stupid, like, what about objective morality? And it failed, and then Kent made up this version of the story to make it seem like he was much smarter and better than he actually was. It was much dumber than he actually was. But as reported, I don't think this is a...
What a philosophy. I said, well, son, I'm glad to hear that because I'm going to shoot you in 5 minutes.
Yes. Threatening violence. Definitely the right way to go.
He said, you can't do that. I said, oh, yeah, you can. You see, I'm the God of my own universe. And I decided it's fine for me to shoot you. What's wrong with that thinking? If evolution is true...
What's wrong with it is that humans are a social species, and so prosociality is heavily favored among contemporary humans as well as evolutionarily. So humans, regardless of whether or not God created humans, have ample reason to act in a prosocial manner, and random-ass murdering isn't, in fact, prosocial, which means that there will be consequences for you doing it, and in fact, there are consequences. And so even if you're just out for yourself and all you care about is the consequences to you, you have good reason to not go around randomly murdering college students, Kent. Regardless of how objective or subjective or absolute or relative morality may or may not be, and how many or how few gods there may or may not be. All of that remains the same. It doesn't matter. There is no possible world in which that prosociality is not a good idea for a social species. That's just how it works. I'm sorry that that doesn't come from on high necessarily. I guess it still could. the fact that coming from on high isn't necessary for murder to be a thing that's bad to do. That's just how it is. There are no other options.
What's wrong with that thinking?
I feel like I went through it, but okay.
Nothing. That's the way it goes, right?
Yes, Kent, that's the way it goes. As long as you don't think about it once at all. I'm taking another.
Survival of the fittest, exactly right. So we're going to study now a little bit about racism and how it ties in with evolution.
I don't think we will. I think we've already covered it. I think I'm going to go find CSE 103 Class 5. I think that's what we're going to do next time. Because, holy hell, am I tired of pointing out the same thing about racism to Kent as I especially given how racist Kent is, right? Like, Kent is the epitome of, I'm not racist, but. Right? And you know nothing that comes after that but is going to be good. And nothing about it is going to be compatible with the thing you said before, which is that you're not racist. So yeah, I'm not going to be lectured about how bad racism is and how it's evolution's fault by a racist Christian who doesn't accept evolution. It's just not going to happen. If that's something you want, again, you can go find CSE 103 Class 4 and start at 55 minutes and 51 seconds. If that's your jam. I can't imagine why it would be. But yeah. Kent is in fact your racist uncle who says he's not racist. And maybe he even has a black friend. Oh. Of course, it's a black friend who he never invites to his house. They just hang out sometimes, like, after work at the bar. So, you know, more of a black acquaintance. Who's, quote-unquote, one of the good ones. That's the kind of non-racist. Whatever you want to say. Alright, so, now that we're done talking about how racist Kent is, which is to say very, it is time to start wrapping things up. So, what I want to say, first of all, is thank you to everyone who has been watching. I'm glad that you chose this over things like vice presidential debates. I appreciate it. But also, speaking of things like vice presidential debates, the election is coming up. Voting starts, I believe, later this month for early voting. So go out, check to see if you're still registered to vote. If you are, check to see if you're on early voting lists, whether or not you're available, whether or not you can get a mail-in ballot, stuff like that. Because the earlier you can vote, the easier it will be for you to actually vote. So, if you are in, now this is for, my American view. If you're not in America, I don't know when your next election is. I don't know how to check your voting rolls, but whatever. But there are websites for both the federal government as well as every state that will help you check to see if you're registered to vote. And if you're not, then usually the easiest way to do this is just to go down to wherever it is that you get your driver's license. Different states have different acronyms. So go do that, check to see, and go out and vote. Get your very minuscule amount of say in the course of the United States' future, where you can vote between. I don't even know. I don't know. It's sort of like I'm voting between like a kind of not very good sandwich, a pile of dog turd. I don't really like either of those options, but I know which one I'm going to pick. So, yeah. Other than that, after this, we're going to be watching Power Rangers Jungle Fury over on the Discord, I believe, right, Vince? All right. So come hang out for that. We will be watching 4 episodes while I double check to see how my frames on Cheaper are going and do other little work things in the background. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope to see all of you. What's coming up next week, or for the rest of the week, is on Thursday. I'm going to make my own dating system with blackjack and hookers, which is the last of my current series about Andrew Snelling, who is in fact a liar. Then on Saturday, we're going to be doing Dapper Reacts. The plan right now is to have Vishanti back on and to continue on with the Pete Greer. Then on next Tuesday, Kent with Bent will be back, where Bent will still not have to wear a tutu. But maybe the next time he will have to wear a tutu. So, yeah. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Before you go, I'd like to just take a second to thank my channel members and patrons, especially those pledging $20 or above. Benthoven, Philrevara, Tapioca Weasel, Whispers, Ellerhan Teller, Horseflesh, Ian Chen, Kelvin Brostick Van Manen, Landon Knoll, Mabdy Babdy, Sphincter of Doom, Vollus, North Texas Fossils, John Ackerman, Strawberry Vein, and Dr. Tapioca Weasel. It's because of my channel members and patrons that I'm able to do this show as I am now with 3 videos a week. Without them, I would be reduced to maybe 1 a week, or maybe even 1 every other week. So, if you like this channel and you'd like to support, there's a link to the Patreon in the description, and a join button below this video. All channel members and patrons get early access to videos, often many months in advance, as well as access to my super secret Discord server that's just for supporters and is a great way to contact me. Thanks for watching.